I'm Fabrice Bardsley. I'm here today with Wai Tsang in Brighton, and Wai's been in Brighton giving a couple of talks on fractal brain theory and all kinds of things, really.
Stuff, yeah.
And really, why have you decided to go on tour and bring your work to people?
Just because I quit my full-time job last year, and the message has really evolved, and the material that's out there now, mainly on YouTube, some stuff on websites, it's old, and the message has rocketed ahead in the past 2 years. So there's loads of new material. I'm actually really eager to get out there. So, say tonight's talk on the fractal genome, that's brand new. It's so new, I've just made it up.
Excellent. Because your fractal brain theory, I found was actually, it opens if you extrapolate it, if you take it to many other different points of reference, it can really give you a different paradigm, a different choice of looking at all kinds of things.
Right. Yeah.
So, can you give us a basic sort of overview of how that sort of the Russian dolls you were talking about and how fractals can fit in with our brains and our
Sure.
consciousness?
Well, I mean, the fractal geometry is called the geometry of nature, and the brain is a natural object. And the trick is to figure out a way. So people for years have suspected the brain is sort of fractal, kind of fractal in some ways, but it kind of ends. And the trick of the theory is to find a unifying language in the form of binary trees and binary combinatorial spaces to map all the structures of the brain, the cognitive structures of spatial mapping, language, etc., music. And then with that unifying language, that's when the fractality comes out, and the reclassivity and the symmetry. So really, it's been a quest that many people have been pursuing for years. So in 1996, a book called Fractals of Brain, Fractals of Mind suggested exactly that. But at that stage, they called it a secret symmetry because it was undiscovered. What the fractal brain theory does is reveals the secret symmetry.
Okay, and so then you can see in many ways how people develop, how systems develop, how nature around us develops.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think it's part of a wider movement, the idea of complexity theory and nonlinear dynamics, which emerged in the past 20, 30 years, along with fractal mathematics, really. The idea that you talk about paradigms and social organisation. I mean, the idea that economics got off the really bad start because it basically tagged on to the wrong mathematics. So economics is so dismal because the mathematical structures which they use to describe a society and economies doesn't fit what they're trying to describe. But the mathematics of complexity theory and fractals do describe society and economics. So there is a movement, particularly based in the Santa Fe Institute in America, which has been really trying to push complexity theory and fractals to apply it to sociology and economics. So there's a real kind of burgeoning movement happening now. And the idea that economics will always be dismal, and the idea that there's a wider aspect of fractal brain theory, that the fractal brain theory, tonight's talk is that it interpolates the workings of the genome. So this is absolutely earth-shattering. I mean, it's going to launch the fractal brain theory and make it completely mainstream, because these are the biggest problems in the world: mind, brain, and then the genome, functional genomics. How does it work? We sequence it. How does it work? No one has a clue.
Yeah.
And what you hear tonight basically is that a single theory spans all of it. So the fractal brain theory extends to the genome, but going the other way, it also extrapolates galaxies and the universe.
So you mentioned sociologically that the fractal brain theory has an impact, especially when you can take it right down to small levels and large systemic levels. The Catholic Church, or the old churches, as you were talking yesterday, they have knowledge of consciousness and how that works, and that they've been, 500 years ago or 300 years ago, canonical law was taken very seriously. The Gutenberg Bible was ingested by people at the time. In the modern day, we have a crown state multinational system, oligarchy, and the media that is coming out now from the 20th century in terms of newspapers, in the age of the internet, less and less people are ingesting that. It just sort of leads me to parallels with, the church becoming outdated in the way that it was. That actually some of these oligarchical systems and their media don't seem to be being responsive to people, because I think with more awareness of actually what people are thinking with, or what choices that they do have. And how do you think fractal brain theory can help maybe bring about a new paradigm for the 21st century?
All right, just to try to distill what you said, I mean, that Catholic Church has suppressed ideas about consciousness, Christ consciousness, whatever. Gnosticism, that's what we were talking about last night. So, I mean, sure, it's, and the kind of system today obviously suppresses certain news items, certain, we all suppress our own shadow, and obviously society suppresses its kind of dark, negative aspects, doesn't report it on the news. But people are learning about these aspects through the internet. So kind of systems of control that would have been kind of feasible in the past with the Inquisition, with the Catholic Church, would have been also been implemented in the post-war period. But I think the internet has really brought about a kind of like freedom of information that has brought about new currents in politics, I believe. That's very hard to control people now and control what people believe. Now, where does the fractal brain theory come in? It's because the central idea behind world religion, in the kind of hidden mysteries, Batin of Islam, Gnosticism, Freemasonry, the Taoism, Vajrayana Buddhism, Tantric, Advaita, Hinduism, Kabbalah, and Judaism. This is essentially the idea that we're all one consciousness, and that we are the universe, we are the Tao, Brahman, the kingdom of heaven, with the Christ. That's the banned information. And so what the fractal brain theory does, it does something really ambitious. This extrapolation to the universe allows us to explain how we are all one consciousness. Now, modern day materialist philosophers, they're looking for some quintessence, some special of the brain that's going to go bing and give rise to consciousness. Now, what more special arrangement of matter can there be than an arrangement of matter in your head that's actually a perfect reflection of the universe? Now how does that allow us to explain the nature of consciousness? Well, first, it allows us to explain how the experience of being one of the universe makes sense. If the universe is like your brain, then adapting an idea from philosophy, organisation variance, basically, structures like ours, the same kind of consciousness. But the entire universe is one fractal structure that's reflected in your brain, and all consciousness in the universe is of the same consciousness, which is a stepping stone to reducing it to one consciousness. Okay, there's a couple more steps involved, but that's the essence of the idea.
And do you feel that that's a cascading feedback loop? So that the more, I guess, people consciously focus on their imaginations, their perceptions, and are aware of the feedback that's coming back to them. Do you think that that can lead to, if people find that a positive experience, do you think that will lead to people in a society-wide?
Yeah, because when we talk about apocalypse, what it literally means is the unveiling of the hidden thing. Now, the idea that we're all one consciousness has always been a kind of hidden idea. It's kind of the elites, exclusive mystics and stuff. If you actually bring it totally in the open and explain it, then what you do something really important, because you literally explain this ultimate mystery in a way that everyone can understand. People might not like it, scientists are not going to like it, materialist philosophers are going to hate it. It doesn't matter, because their position is actually really kind of inconsistent, actually shot with flaws. Whereas we can explain it in a totally consistent way, in this new paradigm, not everyone's going to believe it, but it has new foundations. Now, it's important because the Renaissance gave rise to the Enlightenment, which gave rise to modern political philosophy, ideas like inalienable rights and ideas of human dignity. Now, what people often don't understand is that the Renaissance wasn't just about revival of pagan philosophy. At its essence, look at the Medici, the kind of, Marsilio Ficino, the kind of luminaries of the Renaissance, Pico del Mirandola. He wrote the Oration on the Dignity of Man. They were massively...
Commedia dell'arte. It's, the culture, which is the fundamentals for a lot of the society and art that we...
I mean, basically, they were all massively into this mystical Prisca Theologia, this primal religion. And this is basically what they explicitly rooted it in at that time was the Corpus Hermeticum. So this is a mystical text. You find it down at the Freemasons' headquarters. I mean, it's basically, it really was influenced people like Giordano Bruno, but essentially the idea as above, so below.
Okay, Giordano Bruno was burned 1600, wasn't he, for espousing the idea that the Earth went round the sun.
People
amongst other things.
See him as a progressive thinker and proto-scientist, but he was also a mystic. He believed that everyone is God. All these people, Medici, the Michelangelo, I mean, it's basically, before the bonfire, the vanities, what was burned wasn't just pagan relics and pagan artwork. It was basically, heresies were suppressed. And Gnosticism was stamped out. That's what the Inquisition was trying to do. Now, but for the 21st century, if you can revive the Renaissance and the Enlightenment for the 21st century, then you revive those humanistic values and those kind of values that are eroded by selfish genes, Darwinism, and this idea that we are meat machines.
So that insight or that illumination into yourself and what you're working with is no longer the province of secret groups that may seek to control that. It's out there for those who wish to see at least some of the reflections and interpretations that we can put together of our universe, or the universe that we all consciously share and are part of.
Right. The thing is, loads of people believe in the truth, but it's only recently that people have been saying it explicitly. So I mean, the idea that we, these kind of mystic kind of disciplines where you just reinforce the truth. Now, in the 21st century, with all this science and all this kind of technology and all this materialism, the truth has really been lost. But you'd be surprised how many, secret societies, but also how many people actually believe in the truth. And also, it's at the heart of Sufism, it's at the heart of Kabbalah, and young Jews from Israel, young Sufis in India, in Sudan, all over the Arab world. I mean, Freemasons write to me saying, "Oh God, hey, this is exactly what I believe." But you kind of bring it up from underground to make it explicit, and you give the truth a massive boost.
And so that opens it up to, when people have a much stronger understanding and faith in their ability to empower themselves, or their ability to make the most out of themselves and their consciousness and the lovely thing that that is their life. So do you think some of the protectors of that may not be willing at this time to accept something as empowering as the dynamics of fractal brain theory?
Oh, definitely. I mean, in the realm of ideas, I mean, like the idea of... I was a keen follower of this anthropologist called Anthony Wallace, because he described this process called maze-way resynthesis. It's about paradigm shift, basically. Idea of, the German word Weltanschauung, worldview, paradigm, maze-way, it's all about the same thing. This idea that the maze-way, or the paradigm for society, becomes dysfunctional. It leads us towards death and destruction, basically, which is what's happening on the planet today. And a new paradigm arises, or a new resynthesized maze-way, and basically when it appears, it's going to be challenged. And also when it appears, often many different paradigms, Weltanschauung, or maze-ways appear, and there'll be a bit of a fight. And then basically, whichever paradigm wins is going to determine how society behaves, how corporations, behave, and how it's really determines the future of the planet. So the current paradigm is really taking the planet to destruction, to perdition, really. Yeah. So I think to really change the paradigm, you need something massive behind it. Now look, mind, brain, massive scientific puzzle, genome, massive puzzle, the nature of the universe, massive, these are the biggest puzzles there are, and throw on top of it the mystery of consciousness. What one solution covers a lot. Isn't that something that could start a paradigm shift? That's what I believe.
It definitely, when people have an understanding of that, it gives them the option to have their voice heard. Right, because right. If you always have to go to the priest to get conversation with yourself and your own consciousness, then that gives the person, the priest, the opportunity to stay in that privileged position, maybe at your expense, right, whether it's a banker, whether it's Saatchi and Saatchi, sure. Simon Cowell, image maker, so. And how people love watching Fractals and Mandelbrot set and things like that. Often that's the only understanding they have of it.
Sure.
And do you think that there's more that can be done to make it accessible to people?
Well, this paradigm shift, it needs to happen in the next couple of decades, really. There's not that much time. I mean, 40 years, if nothing happens, it's the end,
Mm-hmm.
And maybe even less time than that. Now, you've got clever intellectual ideas, and science is really conservative, academia is really conservative, and obviously mainstream media suppress radical ideas. What you need to do, you need a movement behind it, and there's another factor behind this fractal brain theory, and it's to do with artificial intelligence and technological singularity. Now, political power really comes from economic power and shifts in kind of economic activity. There's this a fundamental shift that's going to appear on this planet, and it's called artificial intelligence. Well, I've told you that the guys on the most cutting edge of mainstream artificial intelligence, they say certain things. Like say Jeff Hinton, the godfather of deep learning networks, and in recent talk he says the next thing is this missing generative process. Well, I don't think you go into details, but to see big names. Dennis Hassabis, he talks about this kind of like need to tackle conceptual knowledge, and Andrew Ng of Google, the need to do unsupervised learning. What if this brain theory gives the answers to all these, what they're asking, these big names, and I can actually explain it in quite a short space of time in a couple of talks? Then I think that's another kind of, what's the expression, kind of arrow in the quiver.
Yeah, it definitely there's a platform through that for engagement, because whatever we do is, if you give somebody a hug, it's a brain body reaction.
Right.
If you're watching some sport, it's a brain eyes reaction. So everything is done with with our consciousness and.
Well, you're right. It has to, the paradigm shift has to happen on all levels. So I don't want to take it totally to artificial intelligence technology. It has to be personal as well. It has to be spiritual and economic and social. So really, in terms of giving people a choice, I mean, the paradigm isn't, believing we're all one consciousness or nothing. So in a sense, materialism is right. It does seem that there's a physical universe out there. I can't go, we're one consciousness, therefore you're hungry, I'm hungry. I kind of, I can put a spoon in your mouth, feed you, and then I'm not hungry anymore. Of course not, with two separate things. So there's practicalities in duality in normal existence. So, but okay, this is an important point. The new paradigm is inclusive. Now, in the same way that the idea of a flat Earth doesn't accommodate the idea of a spherical Earth, but the idea of a spherical Earth does accommodate the idea of a flat Earth on a very small level. Now, the idea that the Earth revolves around the sun, okay, which you know is the case, okay, accommodates the idea that the sun revolves around the Earth. Okay, no, let me explain. When we say the sun rise and sun down, in a sense, that's correct.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Now, what this new paradigm accommodates there of the ancient mystery religions and the inner mysteries of religion, and also accommodates the idea of materialism and physicalism. But materialism and physicalism on its own, the idea of a purposeless universe, taken as absolute assumptions, doesn't accommodate the bigger picture. So what we're giving is the bigger picture that accommodates the existing worldview, but also gives a return to the ancient mysteries and makes it complete.
Okay, and so if you look at that in terms of the as above, so below perspective, you were talking about, and from the microcosm to the macrocosm, from the smallest to the biggest, and vice versa. How do you think that is put in the grand scale of history, and in terms of how as a civilization, a young, obviously angry, childish civilization, but how do you think that can extrapolate in that way? And I suppose another thing is, you really mentioned a revolution or a bifurcation. That's sometimes, to explain it with an analogy, when the seasons change, and some branches drop off and some grow stronger, and so nature shakes off the.
Well, I mean, the idea of as above, so below, as is the microcosm, so is the macrocosm, is basically fractal view of the universe. What I'd say is basically, civilization is really driven forwards by the perennial wisdom. It keeps reappearing. Some materialists and atheists will dismiss the contribution of religion, and we've got to remember what religion becomes is not how religion starts. Actually, look at all religion; it all starts off as progressive, and it becomes distorted. So, I mean, it's going to surprise a lot of people, but Muhammad gave women rights, gave divorce rights, property rights. Now, it wasn't amazing, but it was progress.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? A very backward society became slightly more progressed. When fundamentalists go, we've got to take things back to Muhammad's time because it's perfect. There's been a very antithesis what Muhammad's about. You're going to go for all religions, and it's like that. Anyway, so Richard Dawkins would say, arch-atheist would say that, okay, he knows that selfish genes and materialism on its own. So he says selfish genes, he actually says he is a passionate anti-Darwinian, he says. Seriously, repeatedly to say he's a passionate anti-Darwinian when it applies to the idea of applying selfish genes to organising society. Because he knows very well that the mathematics of selfish genes is also the mathematics of genocide. George Price, the guy who actually formulated selfish genes doctrine, basically, altruism, you help your fellow man, you're actually being selfish because you're actually helping members of the community genetically similar to you. So by the same token, if you kill people genetically dissimilar, actually also help your genes. Anyway, so he says basically that selfish genes is anti-Darwinian, that will lead to society. That's Thatcherite. And it doesn't take a genius to work out that a Thatcherite neoliberal will actually take selfish genes to justify their behaviour, their doctrines, their Ayn Rand, their selfishness, etc., as absolute selfishness as a virtue. Now, there's a precedent because, the first wave of Darwinism. Now, Darwinism is correct, but it's a partial theory. Like all science theories are partial. It's not the absolute truth. It's one view of it. Okay, the first wave of Darwinism, you had Darwinism, social Darwinism, eugenics became racial hygiene in Germany, became theozoology. Hitler got into theozoology as a young man in Vienna, became Nazi ideology. The idea that Adam Curtis talks about this a lot. I admire Adam Curtis. I think he does a great job of looking at the kind of biggish picture in modern times. Now, the idea that selfish genes Darwinism on its own is going to lead to some quite dark ideology, and ideologies, and it's happening. And Richard Dawkins then says religion has no part, only a tiny little part in establishing society, but he has no other answer as to what counters this horrible Thatcherite society that he himself dreads. And I say basically it is this Renaissance Enlightenment Prisca Theologia. It's the teachings of the prophets. It is Judeo-Christian values that have become corrupted, and it is these humanistic values of the human dignity, sanctity of human life, inalienable rights. Look, you try to you have an atheist materialist say, oh, selfish genes, we're meat machines, and that implies inalienable rights. Well, it doesn't. That implies human dignity. It doesn't. And that's what's missing. So basically, we need to revive these Enlightenment values. Americans lament that their constitution is being eroded. The constitution evolved in a kind of ecosystem of values that came from the Enlightenment. Well, those values are gone, and it's replaced with selfish genes. So basically, that's what you need to revive.
Yeah. And in terms of that, you mentioned Thatcherism, and that often always evocatively thinks of divisiveness.
Sure.
People are often divided because of race, sex,
Yeah,
height,
yeah.
size, colour of their eyes, colour of their hair, and all of those kind of break down to the sort of playground argument of my genes are better than your genes, no.
Yeah.
And I think with my comprehension of the fractal theory, that seems to show that the diversities or the developments of those, whether they stand the genetic test of time or not.
Sure.
But that diversity is necessary for consciousness to feed back to itself, for us to feed back to ourselves.
Don't get me wrong. I mean, selfish genes is a partial theory. It's not wrong. It's not the absolute complete truth. So we know chimpanzees do genocide. We know it's just quite systematically. Humans do genocide. That's a fact. But we live in a civilization, and for civilization to exist, we can't kill each other. There's a new wave in evolutionary biology which actually emphasizes ideas of cooperation and symbiosis and synergy. And this is basically also has its own mathematical foundations, which are very sound. And these are other aspects of the picture. So it's when people say that selfish genes, atomization, there is no society, said Margaret Thatcher, somehow that's the complete picture. It's not, it's one side of the picture. And there is this kind of divergence in society, in diversity, and in diversity scraps and fights, and there's competition, and there's warfare, and etc. But it's a complementary process of coming togetherness. And even someone like E.O. Wilson, who broke ranks to say that there is basically group selection. So there's other views now. Robert Sapolsky, who talks about the idea of what he calls pseudo-kinship. So basically that, it is a fact that in nature and in human society, you do get together with people who are totally dissimilar genetically with each other, and you help each other. And symbiosis, clownfish and sea anemone, happens all over the place. Mitochondria and cells. And it's not, it's not selfish genes and divergent competition, etc. Is kind of, most of it, and kind of symbiosis is kind of that much. It's kind of 50-50, I'd say.
So it's like 1 and 1 makes 3. The shrimp in there. They're more than the sum of their parts when they function together.
Right, and I would say that the idea of coming togetherness, synergy, and symbiosis and cooperation goes hand in hand with a new movement in science, which I'm detecting it's happening, is to do the idea that, say, the physicist, well-respected physicist Paul Davies talks about in recent talks about bringing back meaning and purpose back into the universe. Now, in recent years, there's something called time reverse quantum mechanics. The wave function, Schrödinger's wave function, goes forwards in time, but very beautifully, mathematically elegant way of looking at things also time reverses it. So basically, you have physicists talking about destiny wave functions. What meaning, purpose? Now, the fractal brain theory, the extrapolation of it to the universe, you know that all your ideas, all your behaviours are obviously purposeful, they're meaningful, aren't they? If you extrapolate the brain theory to the universe, then basically it goes hand in hand with these ideas of time reverse quantum mechanics and a purposeful universe, which then, is practically the rest of esoteric religion, really, prophecies and the purpose, the eventual, the great work. I know it's got bad connotations, magnum opus with one world order. That's this idea, basically, that eventually we have heaven on earth, and that eventually the universe becomes Godhead, becomes cosmic Christ. Universal Vishnu.
Well, I suppose a lot of people with things such as world order, a new world order, and George Orwell's Big Brother. We have a huge number of cameras around here, and from your position, I wondered what sort of reflections you had on I guess the modern day priests who would say, "Here, have a bit of alcohol, and I'll talk to God for you." In that way, yeah.
Well, I mean, the Christian Eucharist is a kind of Mithriatic sacrament that's been watered down, like Coca-Cola, cocaine taken out. And if I tell you something, a funny story about the New World Order. I mean, I used to work in this church in the West End. I quit last year, and who came to a quite special service, or military guy, big general, who came to the church. Lord Rothschild. I was looking at Lord and Lady Rothschild, I was thinking, gosh, is that the eye in the pyramid? And the church where I worked, St James's Piccadilly, is right near Chatham House. So
Yeah.
I'm thinking, gosh, is that Cosmo Crater, head of the banking archons of the world? I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, there is a relationship between esoteric religion and banking, from the Ishmaeli to Knights Templars to even the kind of Quaker Lloyds and Barclays. And the idea that that there is an esoteric agenda, like some conspiracy theorists believe. I don't always say conspiracy theorists in a pejorative way. I mean, it's obviously people conspire, and it's a fact of life. The idea that the Rothschilds might be into esoteric religion, Kabbalah. Well, that's great, because it's exactly what the conspiracy theorists like David Icke into. So how's that for a unifying way of looking at the world, bringing together conspirator and conspiracy theorists? It's unification, isn't it? It's real reconciliation.
Yeah. It's an interesting one, because often some of the things that hold people to reliance on outside agencies other than themselves is often fear, and
sure.
And that can often lead people to give control of their conscience, give control of their their perceptions, their life over to other people.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong. I mean, there's horrible, dark things that go on, the Inquisition, and there's people snatching each other's power away, and probably are horrible banking stuff going on, and we can speculate, we can guess, we can't know for sure. But I tend to think of myself as an optimist, that sometimes the most demonic of powers become the most enlightened. Mongols were absolutely ghastly. I mean, they were the badass, barbarians of the antiquity. Now they're all Buddhist monks. Isn't that a kind of a good way of looking at things? That maybe there's evil trends that then convert to light.
Well, as I was talking about civilization earlier being maybe a young angry child, maybe that was a similar phase through with the Mongols when they're on horseback saying, "We've arrived, don't ignore us." And now, as you say, the culture is very, very, very different, but they still have their roots in that.
Well, I tend to believe that through the years I tend to take in sides one way or the other. Been angry at that thing, or just like that group or this other group. You get older, you just realise, if I found myself in their position with their conditioning, I'll probably do exactly as they do. Mongols, I mean, they lived in very harsh conditions. Arabs were very brutal because they basically really had to fight each other for the scarce resources in the desert. And Vikings, obviously, and that's why they were so bad and good at warfare. But then you realise, they're not evil. It's just basically, if I was in their circumstances, I'd be exactly as they are.
Yeah, if you were born in Saudi Arabia, the chances are you would be a Wahhabist, because you wouldn't meet somebody to marry. You wouldn't. Your children would be ostracised. You wouldn't. And so it seems that we're in more of an age now to have certain liberties to express ourselves. One place where there can be quite a bit of change and tension is in terms of legislation and law.
Sure.
I've been fortunate enough to have quite a few people help me and enable me to help other people with sometimes some really frivolous and nonsensical laws.
Sure.
And when you come across a dynamic that is functional, that fits the reality of a situation.
Sure.
I found that in terms of the law, I'm able to recreate it.
Yeah.
So it's almost like I have a Be Fair With Me fractal process. And that can be replicated in many different scenarios when it's confronted by that. And do you think that with such things as silly legislation, that kind of attitude, or people having that kind of attitude, can actually bring about justice, along with religion and politics, change very slowly, unlike technology, which...
All right. That's a big question. The laws of the land. I mean, norms and values and morals, obviously rooted in your worldview. The worldviews change. If you have kind of Enlightenment values, not of equality, liberty, fraternity. Obviously, your outlook on laws is going to be different than what's happening today, where corporations buy laws that suit them. So I guess it's really, I guess what's happening now is that laws and government is not kind of values or they're progressive politics. Is that we're progressing to something. Because progressive politics is gone, what's happening is basically self-interest, and it's laws being made to whoever can actually bid the highest, lobby the most.
Yeah,
especially in America.
For example, I mean, we have an election coming up. Before the last election, lots of people said their policies on the policing system. Not one party mentioned police and crime commissioners.
Yeah.
That legislation was put through. There was no public response when they tried to elect them. I think they got about a 15% turnout, which is abysmal, and there's definitely, can't be considered consent in any way. Yeah. But yet, the interests that wish for that to happen, which can open the doors to privatisation of individual forces and other corporations, being able to profit from public services.
Sure.
It's hard for people to feel that actually, if they're cross, if they really didn't like that, they're cross. Actually, they didn't know where to stick their cross. So sometimes people are now taking legal steps because they feel that they can get more traction by registering their non-compliance with the system that way than they can through attempting to use a ballot box when people will renege on one promise and pull another promise out of thin air.
No, sure. I mean, that's a kind of Russell Brand's big thing, isn't it? Like, basically voting doesn't count anymore, and I mean, the ability to influence things with ballot boxes is really small in these days. I mean, it's not insignificant, and I wouldn't say don't vote, but it's not a very inspiring choice, is it? I mean, that's a funny thing. I mean, Ed Miliband lives down the road, and his son was in my daughter's nursery class, and a couple of years ago in the birthday party, there he was. So I had a chance to meet Ed Miliband. I was reading about the fall of the left wing and the demise of progressive politics, and then I met Ed Miliband, and I thought, gosh, this is kind of crystallised what I've been reading. I mean, I think, to be fair, he's not any worse than the other leaders. But then I thought, gosh, Labour is the bastion of progressive politics and the left wing, and it doesn't really exist anymore. It doesn't exist. I mean, really, it's...
And I think that's why I drew the comparison of how seriously people took the Gutenberg Bible when people could first see that. And 100 years ago, the socialist movement, there were general strikes, and there was 20, 30 years later, there was housing being developed in a health service to respond to that. But actually today, in that way, people don't believe Ed Miliband that much. There's a clip of Ed Miliband doing the rounds, and he's asked 5 different questions and breaks down the answer. He says exactly the same answer to 5 different questions, just to make sure that's the only thing that goes on the news.
Well, it's bland, isn't it? It's basically, it's not offend anyone. I mean, Adam Curtis puts it, politics has become measuring the temperature of the room and adjusting the thermostat slightly. That's what's become. I mean, really, and it wasn't past. It wasn't about that. It was about basically progress and there's purpose to politics. I mean, what was his name? Was it Brian Gould? It was the advisor to New Labour, Tony Blair, etc., who died a couple of years back. And he said, he kind of lamented that Labour didn't rule with a sense of purpose. But the sense of purpose is gone. So what hope's there? No. When I say progressive politics and the left wing, I'm not talking about socialism and Marxism. What I really basically, the facts are that you had the Renaissance, you had the Enlightenment, which gave rise to the left wing. Left wing of the Estates Generale in the French Parliament, and which was the kind of anti-hereditary privilege, all these kind of left-wing princelings, kind of sons and daughters of Labour MPs, fast-tracked to being next-generation leaders. That's hereditary privilege. Well, anyway, when I talk about revival of the left wing, I'm really talking about a kind of reinterpretation of Enlightenment humanistic values for the 21st century. So let's not call it even socialism, or definitely not Marxism.
But it's interesting, in terms of that right-left paradigm.
Sure.
If you take Charles Darwin as survival of the fittest, and you have the likes of Cecil Rhodes inventorying with the East India Company, the managers, they have control of that. It's great up until 1848, Karl Marx and Frederick Engels. The workers, you can't actually produce anything with the workers. And combining that with the appearance of scarcity of resources. And that's been the political dialogue up until 2012 or the turn of the century, whereas it seems that the 21st century model seems to be much more of a totalitarian libertarian bandwidth, and that's what people are engaging with. They're seeing a lot of the conventional left-right paradigm as just a semi-totalitarian oligarch where you vote for the colour rosette that you'd like the manager to wear.
I mean, I think the right wing, it was that you don't have to be instructed to be right wing. You don't have to be instructed to look after your kids and try to look after the and to avoid hereditary tax and things like that, and it's like the default. That's what I'm trying to say. The right wing, the Estates General, the man with the biggest stick rules, the king. The divine right of kings to rule. Whereas the left wing was about spiritual ideas of equality, liberty, fraternity, which is exactly what we're talking about kind of pseudo kinship, about not basing our politics on selfish genes. Plato's Republic, where one version of politics is basically, politics is helping your friends and hurting your enemies. Now there's some truth in that. That's macaque monkeys. That's how they behave. That's macaque politics. But humans are not macaques. We've got this huge society, and it's a global society. And we have to get along, or else we're going to die. So we need somehow to revigorate these ideas of equality, liberty, fraternity, meritocracy for the 21st century. And that better sound good. We can't call it socialism. We can't call it Marxism, and definitely not call it communism. But the key values need to be revived.
In terms of like tolerance and acceptance, I mean, one of the biggest bars to communication that often seems to be these days is pack mentality and the judgment that often goes with that, in terms of that divisiveness. And I think if people can break part of that, just that dialogue, because culture has to be reinforced for it to maintain its predominance if it's not apparent in people's own nature.
So
it's for the way forward in terms of when people take their judgment out, if you say, I appreciate the right wing policies of the free market, because then people are free to choose who they want their rubbish delivered by, or how much security they'd like, or anything of that nature. But yet I'm also in favour of the socialist philosophy of looking after people who may not have that support around them.
Sorry, I have to stress, basically, I think it's about balance. It's not either or. I think the trouble with the world is basically it's gone right to the defaults, selfish genes. I think, basically I look after my kids more than I care about them more than, say, other kids in school, And this is a human nature. And it's really about balance, really. I mean, I guess I'm right wing and left wing, but restoring the balance when now things have become neoliberal and completely right, and the left wing has vanished. That's the problem. So I would say we need to just basically balance out this kind of tendency to look after ourselves, our kin, our children, which is perfectly fine. Basically this is human nature. But basically we live in this huge, complex society, and it's not going to survive for the next 20, 30 years, world society, if it's basically, selfish genes. So I guess it's restoring the balance. And we do that by going back in history, and we trace where did this other factor that makes, kind of counteracts Richard Dawkins' selfish genes and horrible world he envisages. That's why he doesn't, want to apply his own theory to organising society. What is the other factor that's actually been counteracting the selfish genes to make it not such an unpleasant society. And I'm saying it's basically the esoteric religion, which has given rise to mainstream religion and also given rise to the Renaissance and the Enlightenment values.
And
so that's the trick.
And the ethics that come from that,
Exactly,
to be able to explore new avenues of art, thought, and invention,
exactly.
and have the liberty to do that, and everybody have an equal chance to do that. And I think when people detach their judgment from it and close themselves off to say, well, that can't possibly work, or that can't do that, and go, well, I might not think it will work, but good luck and have a go. Because even if you find out your judgment is mistaken, then actually, society has often says, well, you're wrong, when actually you found a way that doesn't work. You found a process that isn't functional for you at that moment, at that time. So that's a win. Learn something. And I think if people can do that on an individual level, then that opens out much more of their ability to impact the environment around them and change that dialogue from selfish to...
definitely, I guess it's kind of on an individual level and kind of, in terms of social movements as well, definitely. I guess that's the problem with the Occupy movement. It didn't have a game plan. It didn't have a long-term aim. So you need some kind of worldview, basically, to present that's compelling. And someone would be, Marxism or neoliberalism, or if everyone converts to fundamentalist Christianity, or everyone becomes a fundamentalist Muslim. It's not going to happen, basically. There's a real diversity in this world. It's really coming to a boil. Really the world is coming together, and it's not a pretty place. It's quite violent, and it's really kind of going somewhere not particularly good. Now, in these critical junctures, that's when you need a new way of interpreting all these histories of all these different peoples to show that really they share the same history. And the way to do that is that there's a common root behind all world religion, there's a common root behind the Renaissance and Enlightenment, there's a common root behind including science. And it's basically this hidden religion. And this hidden religion, esoteric religion, this Priscan theologia, if we talk about this apocalypse being the unveiling of the hidden thing for the 21st century, then basically you revive that core, that commonality behind all the world's religions, all science, and all the kind of political movements of the left wing even. And then that's a really powerful way of looking at the world. That's a unifying message.
So, and that I guess would be letting that tree of life. If you like, we mentioned sacred geometry a little bit earlier in terms of its similarities to fractals. And that obviously is a functional element in nature, because it's recreated in so many forms.
Well, I mean, the tree of life, and also the kind of diverging out from the same roots to kind of different doctrines and conflict and diversity, and then there's real powerful appeal to fundamentalism. The idea that things were great, the kind of golden age in the past, and we can restore the world if we can revive this golden age. What I'm talking really is about going right back to the beginning of Islam, right back to the beginning of science. We're talking, kind of Giordano Bruno. What did they believe? They believed in Corpus Hermeticum. They believed in esoteric religion, basically. And these ideas in esoteric religion, as above, so below, as is the microcosm, so is the macrocosm, I think are going to make a dramatic return for the 21st century. And the ideas of a purposeful universe, the idea of a tree of life. I mean, Christ, this idea of a backward emanating, time reverse quantum wave. It's like the roots of a tree, and the forward emanations is like the branches of a tree, and it intersects. It's that mystical ancient idea, complete returns from the 21st century. And I think this is where science is heading. This is what politics needs, and it's basically there's already many secret societies and the kind of esoteric traditions in world religion that are actually ready to receive this kind of message once you have a kind of platform and some momentum behind you, and also if you can communicate it to them in a way that they can understand and accept, I believe.
And how do you feel the potential is for that in the future, for people to be able to receive it? And what do you think that people can do to look after their freedom of consciousness, to make the most of what they have?
Obviously, the idea of convincing a kind of ISIS follower that the Batin, that the Shia believe in, is the truth. It's not going to happen. You know, the idea of convincing a fundamentalist Christian that there's this kind of Gnostic strain which is actually more true to Christianity than what they believe, you know, it's not going to happen. But the thing about the new ideas is that in times of crisis, there's an opening for new ideas to appear. There's already many people in positions of power, many groups already believe it or will be ready to receive it. But the main thing is that in times of crisis, it will often be the young that receive these new ideas. I'll tell you a fact. There's going to be another 3, possibly 4 billion people on this planet in the next 20 years. I can tell you with certainty, all these people are going to be young people. And young people, seeing the state of the planet, they're going to look for new interpretations. And it's not, again, it's basically, you've got this huge message of genes and fractal brains and cosmology and consciousness and artificial intelligence and singularity. And if you can tack on the political, religious, esoteric stuff, but also open it up to atheists and materialists. What won't stand is bigotry. What doesn't tolerate is bigotry. But it basically tolerates the entire spectrum. And I believe if it can give an answer of unification, is these 3 billion young people who are going to be really not all of them, but a certain proportion that can be the ones to take it up. And these are going to be sons and daughters of people in the establishment, people in power, and ordinary folks. You know, so I think it's in the long run, even though it sounds like this idea of paradigm shift sounds something really chaotic. You know, how can you possibly shift the paradigm? Well, one, it needs to shift, and the time is going to be ripe, or starting now, really. So,
number 2, it is shifting because there are police officers, there are MI5 agents, there are political advisors who are becoming much more aware, business leaders who are becoming much more aware of exactly what is happening around, and they're continuing to go through the motions until the moment comes where actually it's time to move into that gear.
No. At the end of the day, I mean, as things progress, the oceans are rising, and the world is going to go really down the toilet next. Well, it's a progressive thing.
Yeah.
Global warming is expected to accelerate. There was a lull. Now it's basically this year. It's kind of shifted again.
Now we have more places that are radioactive.
Well, at the end of the day, it's going to dawn on people. It's going to dawn on the kind of banking archons. It's going to dawn on everyone. Political leaders, your establishment. That basically we're all in this together. We're all going to die. It's going to be horrible. So when that point comes, then that's when a new message, a new Weltanschauung, a new Mazeway, a new paradigm really comes to the fore. So I think the process began in 2012. Personally, I think the shockwaves began then, and it'll take a couple of years.
I think I'm in agreement, and I feel that the more people actually turn up, it's not like people have to go and do anything that go out on a crusade to save the world. They actually just have to listen to themselves and take responsibility, take personal responsibility for their own consciousness and what they do with it. And if they feel something, then turn up and play your part. Be the force of your own nature.
No, completely. I mean, with any kind of social movement, we're talking about a world social movement. There's going to be activists, there's going to be subscribers, there's going to be sympathisers. So people partake in different levels. And maybe you're zealots and you're fanatics. I mean, if you you want the fanatics and the zealots because you can start a social movement. You actually want them because you don't want the rival social movements, the zealots and the fanatics. I'm kidding. Sort of.
Well, sometimes those zealots and fanatics come in when people aren't in a position to accept what is going on, and they often take control from people and safeguard them is allegedly what their reasoning is.
Yeah.
And is it to Jack Nicholson, to Tom Cruise? You want the truth? You can't handle the truth. So do you think people, are ready to handle, the potential for some of those control mechanisms that people put a lot of faith in?
Yeah.
Do you think that people are ready for some of those bifurcations or some of those unveilings or apocalyptic?
Well, I'd say a kind of revolution kind of really builds. I'd rather see a revolution build on top of what's there. Really, I don't really see a kind of the revolution is going to totally take away all your rich people's possessions and all your land and stuff. I really see this revolution driven by the technological singularities, which will generate enormous wealth in a very short space of time. It's really building on top of what's there. There's going to be progressive taxation. There's going to be, shift of wealth, but I don't really see a kind of Russell Brand scenario. We're going to take all the factories and workers are going to run them and that kind of thing. It's not going to happen in this time round.
So you feel it'd be more like if society's running along like a Ford Sierra and the next generation are building a Lamborghini, then people are going to go, old Ford, new sports car.
It needs to really accommodate the old. You can't really, the idea that you have a revolution and you kind of basically force people to adopt a new worldview. It's not going to be like that. Basically, you're going to have a kind of structure built on top of the old, a progressive structure on top of the old, and you let the old structure, it coexists. Let's really see a need for a new wave dismantling and trying to destroy the old wave and trying to take it over. I really see it as building on top. I see the kind of children of the establishment becoming part of the new order, but still respecting that their mums and dads are part of the old order. So that's why I see it.
And so nature will fall away what it doesn't need in its own way.
It takes time, yeah, and I think that's a far easier way to approach this kind of thing than say, victory or death. We either take out the rascals or nothing, or boot them all out. I don't believe in. I think the idea of, say, many people in the Occupy movement I met really was kind of, let's take back the factories. Let's take the factories from the factory owners and the kind of thing. I don't think that's going to really work in the 21st century.
The battle cry of the fanatics, which is death to all fanatics, and see where that gets you.
Yeah, exactly. Well, no, seriously, the kind of revolution I envisage accommodates potentially those very forces which conspiracy theorists might think are the kind of archdemons of the world. I think everyone potentially is, kind of can turn to the light. I don't see a kind of, even the idea of the 1% and the 99%, I don't really believe that. I believe the 1% could actually be a part of the process to actually be positive. Even the 1%, even the cosmic crater or the eye of the pyramid could actually be turned as a force for good. I mean, I'm not an optimist, really.
Again,
maybe not.
No, there's always the judgment with good and bad. Obviously depending on which church you stand in or which perspective you have. But that's the beautiful thing I think about the fractal brain theory, is it actually deals with not judgments but actually what's productive, what grows, what fits, what suits the nature that we have.
Right.
It's been great talking with you. What can people do if they want to find out more about what you do, your research, and where you're going to be, and if you could tell us a little bit about your book as well, because I know that's hot off the presses.
Oh yeah. I quit my full-time job last year, so it's been the message is progressing much faster now. I quit last July. On the 4th of July, that's just the way it worked out. Yeah,
Independence.
Exactly. Yeah. And a new book is out. I mean, that's really it's biographical, but it goes into my experiences doing political talks at Occupy, all the kind of political meetings I had at the church, etc. Tony Blair's in there, Ed Miliband, Rothschilds, etc. So it's funny. This guy's working in a church where he meets a lot of people. So it's actually quite a riveting story. Actually, it's funny. If people think working in a church you're some kind of verger in a kind of dainty black robe. No, you deal with loads of trouble, meet aristocrats, meet drunks, and really exciting 10 years. Anyway, so I quit that job, and things are moving much faster, and there's loads of material to come. There's basically science papers. There's a full software implementation of the fractal brain theory, which is going to be the seed to basically a startup, and I've called it the startup at the end of time, because it's going to create artificial intelligence. And and the genome stuff is brand new, so I'm talking about that tonight.
I'm looking forward to that very much so. And you've got a couple of speaking dates around the country, haven't you?
Yeah, come out in Bristol, London, kind of. But it's going to be continuous. I mean, now it's going to be I just need to also get my public speaking act together as well.
Well, I really enjoyed the talk yesterday.
Oh, fair cheers, yeah. That was a laugh.
To the talk this evening, and if people do have the opportunity to come and catch you talking, I wholeheartedly recommend it.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Right.
Thanks a lot.
Cheers.